The movie begins in rural France, where a rat named Remy lives beneath a farmhouse with his colony. Remy is not like the other rats. While his family happily eats garbage, Remy stops to smell his food, taste it, and think about it, because he has an extraordinarily refined sense of taste and smell. The colony, led by Remy's father Django, treats the world like one giant dumpster, and Remy's brother Emile is completely on board with this lifestyle. But Remy keeps sneaking into the farmhouse kitchen, obsessively watches a cooking show hosted by the legendary chef Auguste Gusteau, whose motto, "Anyone can cook," has lodged itself permanently in Remy's brain. The farmhouse belongs to an old woman named Mabel, and one day she wakes up, things fall off her stove, she notices the ceiling is cracked, and she starts swinging a shotgun around her kitchen, which is when it becomes clear that the entire ceiling of her house is packed with rats. Hundreds of them, that's the actual living situation. The colony scatters outside in panic, huddling in the grass while Django tries to organize an escape, and the rats flood into a drainage system during a rainstorm. Remy gets separated from his family in the rushing water, tumbling through dark tunnels alone, getting absolutely destroyed by the current, and eventually washing up somewhere quiet and dark, very far from home. He finds a soggy copy of Gusteau's cookbook floating nearby and clings to it, studying the illustrations obsessively as he drifts until he crawls out of the sewer and realizes by climbing a building covered in vines that he has arrived in Paris. In Paris, he can see the glowing sign for Gusteau's restaurant from the rooftop. The restaurant, his hero's restaurant, because of course he can. Inside Gusteau's, things are not exactly thriving. A small controlling chef named Skinner is now running the kitchen, and a young, clumsy garbage boy named Linguini has just shown up with a letter from his mother saying he deserves a job. Linguini is visibly nervous, completely inexperienced, and has the energy of someone who has already accepted failure. Skinner puts him to work as a garbage boy, which is basically the lowest possible rung, and Linguini almost immediately knocks over a pot of soup and then, in a panic, starts dumping random ingredients into it to hide his mistake. Remy has snuck into the kitchen through the skylight and watches this culinary crime from the shelves above. He cannot help himself. He identifies the missing ingredients, grabs a handful of herbs, and drops into the pot to fix the soup himself, which is insane, but he does it anyway. The kitchen erupts in chaos when the chefs notice the rat, but the soup has already gone out to the dining room, and the head waiter Mustafa reports back that the customers love it. Skinner is furious and suspicious, and he assumes Linguini made the soup, which Linguini does not exactly correct. Skinner keeps Linguini on, but he assigns the tough, no-nonsense chef Colette to babysit him. Meanwhile, Remy gets caught and Linguini traps him in a jar, then sneaks outside to get rid of him, but he finds he cannot bring himself to do it because Remy clearly understands everything Linguini says. They sit outside by the scene and Linguini stares at the rat in a jar, and eventually he lets Remy go, fully expecting that to be the end of it, but Remy follows Linguini home. Linguini wakes up the next morning and finds a rat in his apartment, freaks out, and the two of them have a chaotic standoff in the kitchen until Remy, perched on Linguini's head, discovers that by pulling Linguini's hair like a puppet strings, he can control Linguini's hands and body movements. They practice on the cutting board, they cook an omelet, they boil pasta, they taste wine, and it works, shockingly. Linguini stands there with his eyes closed while the rat on his head moves his arms like a marionette. Yeah, that is the whole system. They bring this system into Gusteau's kitchen, where Linguini is already struggling to impress Colette, who is skeptical of him but not entirely hostile. Skinner, meanwhile, has been contacted by his lawyers and is planning to exploit the Gusteau brand with a line of frozen microwave meals, and he has Linguini sign a document that Linguini does not really read. Skinner is also becoming more suspicious that something is wrong with Linguini's cooking, peeking through the blinds, watching him closely, and is generally sneaky about it. In the kitchen, the Linguini-Remy system starts producing genuinely extraordinary food, and the other chefs, including the precise, dedicated Colette, begin to notice. Linguini and Colette are forced to work closely together, and something awkward and romantic starts to develop between them, which neither of them handles well. Then comes the news that the terrifying food critic Anton Ego has announced he will revisit Gusteau's. This matters. Ego is the critic whose savage review years earlier had directly contributed to Gusteau's loss of a star and, some say, to Gusteau's death from heartbreak. Skinner panics, the entire kitchen panics, everyone starts cooking harder. Then Colette discovers a recipe card from Gusteau's personal collection and starts comparing it with Linguini's techniques because the rat on his head keeps steering him toward the same methods as the late chef's own unpublished work. Meanwhile, Remy sneaks around the office alone one night, finds documents hidden in Skinner's desk, including Gusteau's last will and testament, which reveals that Linguini is Gusteau's illegitimate son and the rightful heir to the restaurant. Remy stares at this paper for a long moment. This changes everything. Remy brings the will out of the office, Skinner chases him through the kitchen, out into the street, through a chaotic Parisian intersection, down narrow alleyways on a scooter, with Remy carrying the papers through the city, along the Seine, across rooftops, until Remy finally escapes and the documents end up in the right hands. Linguini ends up in the river. He is fine. The legal situation unravels quickly for Skinner. Linguini is confirmed as Gusteau's heir, Skinner is forced out, and Linguini takes over the restaurant. That works about as well as expected, surprisingly well for a while because Remy is still doing all the actual cooking. The Linguini-Remy partnership is working well in the kitchen. Linguini is being celebrated publicly as a culinary genius. He's doing cooking demonstrations, he's charming the press, and Colette is warming to him. The two of them grow closer as service after service goes perfectly. Ego, dark and angular and dressed like a funeral, formally announces that he will visit soon. He's dismissive, condescending, and completely certain the restaurant will disappoint him. But then the partnership starts to crack. Skinner has been lurking outside Gusteau's and suspects a rat is involved. Remy's rat family, led by his father Django, shows up and asks Remy to use his kitchen access to steal food for the colony. Django thinks Remy is wasting his time trying to cook for humans who will never accept him. Remy refuses, but the conflict stays with him. Things collapse the night before Ego's visit. Colette discovers that Linguini has been lying to everyone about how he cooks. The colony rats flood the kitchen, and Linguini, overwhelmed and guilty, tells the entire kitchen staff that a rat has been controlling him. He tells Colette, he tells everyone. The kitchen staff walks out immediately. All of them. Every chef. Remy is left alone in the kitchen, trapped in a cage by Skinner, while Ego is already seated in the dining room, having arrived formally, notebook in hand, expecting to be disappointed. In the cage, Remy has a vision of Gusteau's ghost, who tells him that he has to make a choice and that the kitchen is right there waiting for him. Remy pops the cage latch himself because he figured out how, and escapes back to the restaurant. He finds Linguini outside and they reconcile. Remy's rat colony shows up at the back door, and Django, after changing his mind, leads the whole family into the kitchen to help. Linguini, who cannot cook but can serve, puts on roller skates and starts working the dining room floor. Remy is now in full command of the kitchen, with dozens of rats working every station under his direction, runs an absurdly organized service staffed by rats. Tiny rats plate food, manage sauces, and work the stove. The whole kitchen is operating at full capacity, just staffed entirely by rodents. Colette comes back when she learns what is really happening and takes up her station. Out in the dining room, Ego sits alone at his table, notebook open, pen ready, and the dish that arrives in front of him is ratatouille. Simple, rustic ratatouille. He lifts a single bite to his mouth, and the taste sends him straight back to childhood, to his mother's kitchen, to the memory of being comforted after falling off his bike. He is completely undone. He empties the plate, he asks for more. He asks to meet the chef. The waiter tells Ego that the chef will meet him after all the other guests have left. Eventually, Remy walks out of the kitchen and introduces himself, and Ego, to his enormous credit, simply sits there and accepts the reality in front of him. A rat made the best meal he has ever eaten. He stares out the window at Paris for a long moment, clearly moved. Ego writes a glowing review, but Skinner, who has been watching, calls the health inspector, and the next day, Gusteau's is shut down because of rats in the kitchen. Shocking, no one saw it coming. Ego's credibility is destroyed when he endorses a rat-run kitchen, and Linguini loses the restaurant entirely. But Linguini, Colette, and Remy regroup. Remy is on the rooftops above Paris at sunrise and takes stock. Linguini and Colette are now together properly, open a small new bistro called La Ratatouille, with Remy as the actual chef, wearing his own tiny chef's hat and running his own kitchen, with Linguini working the dining room and the entire rat colony as loyal, enthusiastic regulars. The place is packed every night, and on the rooftop above it all, the little sign with the rat chef silhouette sways in the Paris evening air, which is a perfect ending for a movie about a rat who just wanted to cook.